Professor John Miller stood at the entrance of the Galactic Federation Academy. The massive building towered above him, its crystal spires reaching toward the purple sky of Centauri Prime. He adjusted his tie and straightened the jacket of his old marine dress blues. The metals on his chest caught the light of the twin suns. 20 years of combat experience had not prepared him for this moment, becoming the first human history teacher at the most prestigious school in the galaxy. 3 years had passed since Earth joined the Federation. The aliens loved human music, art, and food. They were fascinated by Earth's oceans and mountains. But there was one thing about humans that confused and worried them: our history of warfare. "Professor Miller, welcome," said Supreme Scholar Zilfax as he approached. The tall, blue-skinned alien had 6 eyes that blinked in sequence. "The students are ready for your first lecture," John nodded. "Thank you for this opportunity, Supreme Scholar. I hope I can help them understand Earth." "Better, that is the goal," Zilfax replied. His voice sounded like water flowing over rocks. "Many in the Federation fear humans because of your violent past. This class might change their minds." They walked through long hallways made of a material that looked like marble, but felt warm to the touch. Students of different species moved aside as they passed. Some had too many limbs to count. Others floated rather than walked. A few looked almost human, except for their strange colored skin or extra eyes. "Here we are," Zilfax said, stopping in front of a large door. "Your classroom." 27 students from 12 different species. All junior diplomatic officers who will work with Earth in the future. John took a deep breath. "I'm ready." The door slid open silently. The classroom was larger than John expected, with seats arranged in a half circle. Each seat was different to match the needs of its alien occupant. At the front was a teaching area with a holographic projector. The students fell silent when John entered. He could feel their eyes and other sensing organs examining him with curiosity and a hint of fear. "Good morning," John said, placing his teaching materials on the desk. "I am Professor John Miller, formerly Captain Miller of the United States Marine Corps. Earth, welcome to Primitive Combat Methodologies of Sol 3, or as we would call it. On Earth, Human Military History." A student in the front row raised a tentacle. The creature looked like a cross between an octopus and a cat, with purple fur and large yellow eyes. "Yes?" John asked. "Professor, I am Shirla of the Aquatic Worlds. Is it true that humans fought each other for most of your history, that you had wars where millions died?" John nodded slowly. "Yes, Shirla, that is true. Our history is filled with conflict. That's why this class exists, so you can understand this part of humanity." Another student spoke up. This one looked like a giant insect with iridescent wings. "But why fight your own kind? The Vrex have not had a war in 15,000 years. We solve problems through shared mind linking." "Humans don't have mind linking," John explained. "We have different countries, cultures, religions, and beliefs. These differences sometimes led to conflicts." John turned on the holographic projector. A 3-dimensional image appeared in the center of the room: ancient Greek warriors standing in a narrow pass between mountains. "Today we begin with what humans call last stands, battles fought against impossible odds where victory wasn't. The goal. Our first example, the Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BCE. The image changed, showing Persian forces vastly outnumbering the Greeks. 300 Spartan warriors and their allies faced an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die, but they fought anyway to buy time for their people to prepare defenses elsewhere." A gasp went through the classroom. A floating cloud being that glowed with inner light pulsed rapidly, their species' way of showing distress. "But that is illogical," the cloud said, its voice like distant thunder. "Surrender would preserve life?" John smiled slightly. "Logic doesn't always drive human decisions in war, especially when we believe in something greater than ourselves." For the next hour, John explained the battle in detail. He showed how the narrow pass allowed the smaller force to hold back the larger. 1. He described the training of Spartan warriors from childhood. He talked about their weapons, tactics, and ultimately their defeat and death, but in dying they succeeded, John concluded. They delayed the Persian advance. They inspired other Greek city-states to unite and eventually win the war. 3,000 years later, humans still remember their sacrifice. In the back of the classroom, Federation observer Calixi leaned toward Dean Zilthax. Calixi looked like a tall, slender human except for her golden skin and 4 arms. "Is this typical human educational methodology?" she whispered. The students appeared distressed by these concepts. "This is only the beginning," Zilthax responded quietly. "Wait until he reaches what humans call world wars." After class ended, many students lingered, asking John questions. Some seemed troubled, others fascinated. A jellyfish-like being floated up to him. "Professor," it said through its translator. "Device, my species resolves conflicts through chemical communication and consensus. We find it difficult to understand choosing death over compromise." John considered his words carefully. Not all human conflicts could be resolved through compromise. Sometimes one side wanted complete control or destruction of the other. In those cases, standing firm, even at great cost, was the only option. As the last students left, Zilthax approached John. "An interesting first lecture, Professor. I notice you began with an example of human courage rather than human cruelty." John nodded. "I want them to understand that human warfare isn't just about destruction. It's also about sacrifice, bravery, and protecting what we value." "A wise approach," Zilthax said. "Tomorrow's class has doubled in size. Word has spread. Many senior diplomats and military officials have requested access." John raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Really? What are they hoping to learn?" "The Federation has enjoyed peace for millennia," Zilthax replied. "But recently we've encountered species at the galaxy's edge who do not respond to our diplomatic approaches. Some officials believe understanding human combat thinking might help us prepare for less peaceful interactions." John gathered his materials. "So I'm not just teaching history. I'm teaching skills the Federation might need?" "Precisely," Zilthax said. "Tomorrow's topic? Ancient Rome and the development of professional armies," John replied. "Then we'll move forward through time, medieval warfare, gunpowder, industrial war machines, ... and eventually to your nuclear age?" John's face grew serious. "Yes, that will be the hardest for them to understand. How we created weapons that could destroy our entire planet, then lived with that reality for decades." As they walked out of the classroom, John noticed students from different species talking animatedly. In the hallway, they fell silent as he passed, watching him with new eyes. "You've made quite an impression," Zilthax observed. "Let's hope it's the right one," John replied. "We humans want to be seen as more than our wars." "Perhaps," Zilthax said, "but it is your willingness to fight that makes your desire for peace so meaningful. That paradox is what my students need to understand." 3 weeks had passed since Professor John Miller began teaching at the Galactic Federation Academy. His class had grown from 27 students to over 60. Senior diplomatic officers and military officials from across the Federation now attended alongside the junior officers. Today, they would learn about one of the darkest chapters in human military history. John stood at the front of the larger lecture hall they had moved to. The room hummed with quiet conversation in dozens of languages, all automatically translated by the small devices, each being war. "Today," John said, and the room fell silent, "we discuss a concept many of you will find difficult to understand. We call it attrition warfare, fighting until one side simply runs out of soldiers, supplies, or will to continue." He activated the holographic projector. A 3-dimensional map appeared, showing trenches cutting across fields in northern France. "This is the Battle of the Somme, fought in 1916 during what humans call World War I. It lasted for 5 months. By the end, more than 1 million soldiers were dead or wounded. A collective murmur of shock rippled through the audience. John had expected this reaction. Even after 3 weeks, his students struggled to comprehend the scale of human warfare. On the first day alone, John continued. The British Army lost nearly 20,000 men. Dead, not wounded. More than 50,000 were casualties in total, and yet the battle continued for months afterward. Trillivex, a crystalline being who sparkled under the lights, raised a glittering arm-like appendage. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. Professor, I fail to understand the strategic value. If casualties were so high on the first day, why continue with the same approach? John paced slowly across the front of the room. That's the central question of attrition warfare, Trillivex. Both sides believed they could outlast the other. They thought their opponent would run out of soldiers, supplies, or will to fight. First, he showed images of the trenches, narrow ditches where soldiers lived for weeks or months. The aliens saw the mud, the rats, the dead bodies caught on barbed wire. Conditions were terrible, John explained. Soldiers lived in these trenches through rain, snow, and enemy shelling. Disease was common. Many suffered from what we now call post-traumatic stress. Gernox, a large reptilian being with Federation military insignia, spoke next. His scales shifted color as he talked, showing his agitation. But the inefficiency is staggering. Our tactical simulations suggest alternatives with 98.7% fewer casualties. No Federation commander would continue such a costly approach. John nodded. Humans didn't have your advanced simulations. But more importantly, they didn't have your history. For most of human civilization, we've had to work with imperfect information and desperate circumstances. And sometimes our leaders let pride overrule good strategy. He changed the display to show the full Western Front, a line of trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland. This stalemate lasted 4 years. Neither side could break through. New weapons like machine guns and artillery made attacking much more deadly than defending. But generals on both sides kept trying the same approaches, hoping for different results. A floating orb that represented the hive mind of the Nexu Collective pulsed with blue light as it spoke. We have analyzed your historical records. These human commanders knew the casualties would be extreme, yet ordered attacks anyway. In our collective, any member suggesting such waste would be removed from the decision network. Many of these generals were later criticized, John agreed. But at the time, they believed they were doing what was necessary to win. And the soldiers followed orders, believing they fought for their countries, their families, their way of life. John showed images of young men marching to war, smiling and waving. Then he showed what they looked like after months in the trenches, hollow-eyed, dirty, aged beyond their years. World War I changed how humans thought about warfare, John sighed. The romantic ideas about glory and battle died in those trenches. But it didn't stop us from fighting an even larger war 20 years later. In the observation booth above the lecture hall, Admiral Zendrax of the Federation fleet watched with increasing concern. Admiral Zendrax had a humanoid form but with dark blue skin and 4 arms. Beside him stood Dean Ziltax. These tactics are barbaric, Zendrax said quietly, but I can't deny they might be effective against certain threats. Perhaps we've been overconfident in our technological superiority. That's exactly why this course was created, Ziltax replied. The question is whether we can integrate human martial thinking without adopting their casual acceptance of casualties. Down. In the lecture hall, a student asked about weapons used in the war. John explained machine guns, poison gas, and aircraft. Humans are remarkably adaptive, he said. When faced with new threats, we quickly develop new technologies or tactics to counter them. By the end of World War I, warfare had transformed. Horses and swords were replaced by tanks and planes. Another student, a being made of living metal, asked, "Did humans consider the moral implications of these new weapons?" "Yes," John said. After the war, many nations tried to ban certain weapons like poison gas. They created rules about how wars should be fought. But these rules were often broken when the fighting started again. John showed the final casualty figures for World War I on the screen. Over 20 million dead, including civilians. This is why the Federation finds humans concerning, he said. Our capacity for violence, for enduring suffering, and for technological innovation in warfare is unlike anything you've encountered before. As the class ended, the room was unusually quiet. Many students seemed lost in thought as they filed out. Some clustered in small groups, discussing what they had learned. John began packing up his materials when Admiral Zendrax approached him. "Professor Miller," the Admiral said, "your lecture was educational. Next week you'll cover guerrilla warfare, correct?" John nodded. "Yes, Admiral. How smaller forces can fight against stronger opponents using unconventional tactics." "I'll be attending with my senior staff," Zendrax said. "Recent encounters with species beyond Federation space have been concerning. Your insights might prove valuable." After the Admiral left, Dean Zilthax joined John. "Your class has become the most discussed course at the Academy. Some find it disturbing, others fascinating. And you, Dean? What do you think?" John asked. Zilthax's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "I think understanding humans is essential for the Federation's future. Your species is young, violent, and creative, a dangerous combination, but also a potentially valuable one." John smiled slightly. "We come in peace, as we like to say. But we're prepared for the alternative." "Yes," Zilthax said. "That's precisely what worries and intrigues us." The lecture hall was filled beyond capacity for the 6th week of Professor John Miller's class. Students sat in the aisles and some floated near the ceiling. Federation military officers lined the back wall. News of the human professor's lessons had spread throughout the Galactic Federation. Even Ambassador Linda Rodriguez, Earth's representative to the Federation Council, had come to observe today. John looked out at the diverse audience. He saw beings with too many limbs to count, creatures made of light and living metal entities. All waited quietly for him to begin. "Today," John announced, "we examine asymmetric warfare. This is when a militarily weaker force uses unconventional tactics against a superior enemy." He activated the holographic projector. Images appeared of farmers with muskets hiding behind trees and walls, shooting at soldiers in bright red coats. "Marching in straight lines? This is from the American Revolution, when my country fought for independence from Britain. The colonists were outnumbered and had less training and equipment than British forces. But they used different tactics, hiding, striking quickly, then disappearing instead of fighting in open fields." A student with 7 eyes and green skin raised a hand. "But Professor, why would the British soldiers continue to use tactics that made them easy targets?" "Good question," John replied. "The British were fighting the way European armies had fought for generations. Standing in lines and firing volleys was considered proper and honorable. The colonists were seen as cowards for hiding and shooting from cover. But the colonists didn't care about looking honorable. They cared about winning." John changed the display to show French resistance fighters during World War II. "Humans," he continued, "have a remarkable tendency to resist occupation even against overwhelming odds. The longer an occupation continues, the more likely resistance becomes, regardless of the technological gap." Zeltor, a hive mind representative with 3 identical bodies sitting side by side, spoke through its central body. Its voice was a harmonious blend of 3 tones. "This contradicts established Federation peacekeeping protocols. Our simulations indicate that superior force demonstrations eliminate resistance impulses. Once a population sees they cannot win, they accept new leadership." John smiled slightly. "That might work for your species, Zeltor. But for humans, external pressure often strengthens resolve rather than breaking it. When you tell humans something is impossible, many will try even harder to prove you wrong." He switched the display to show the tunnels used by Vietnamese fighters during their war against American forces. These tunnel systems stretched for hundreds of miles. Vietnamese fighters lived underground for years, emerging to attack and then disappearing. They used simple traps and weapons against an enemy with helicopters, jets, and advanced technology. A floating cloud being pulsed with light as it spoke. "Did the technologically superior side lose this conflict?" John nodded. "Yes, after many years and many deaths on both sides, American forces withdrew. The Vietnamese fighters had greater determination to continue, no matter the cost. They were fighting for their homeland. In the private viewing chamber, Federation Security Director Peller watched the lecture. Peller had a vaguely insect-like body with multiple limbs and eyes. 6 of her eyes were focused on John while the other 6 monitored data feeds. "This explains our difficulties integrating Earth," Peller said to Ambassador Rodriguez, who sat beside her. "We've been applying standard protocols, but humans respond differently to pressure." "Precisely," agreed Rodriguez. "You'll find we make better partners than subjects. Humans don't like being told what to do, especially by outsiders." Back in the lecture hall, John displayed images of the Battle of Bunker Hill from the American Revolution. "Look here," he said, pointing to colonial militia positions. These were mostly farmers with minimal training. They were facing trained British regulars, professional soldiers. The colonists didn't win this battle, but they inflicted heavy casualties and gained confidence. They learned they could stand against the world's strongest military power. A reptilian student in Federation military uniform spoke up. "Professor, how does one counter such tactics? If a Federation peacekeeping force encountered human-style resistance, what approach would you recommend?" John thought carefully before answering. "The most effective approach is to understand why people are fighting and address those concerns. Military superiority alone rarely brings lasting peace." He changed the display again, showing modern guerrilla fighters in various Earth conflicts. Throughout human history, smaller forces have defeated larger ones by being more determined, more patient, and more willing to suffer. They make the war so costly that the stronger power eventually decides it's not worth continuing. Admiral Zendrak stepped forward from the back of the room. "Professor Miller, are you suggesting that military force is ineffective against human populations?" "Not ineffective," John replied, "but often insufficient by itself. The most successful occupations in human history combine military presence with efforts to win popular support, providing security, improving living conditions, and respecting local customs." John displayed a final image: Earth resistance fighters working alongside alien allies against a common enemy. "Humans make dangerous enemies," he said, "but valuable allies. The same determination that makes us resist occupation also makes us loyal to our friends. We will fight as hard for allies we respect as we will for ourselves." After the class ended, students clustered in groups throughout the hall, discussing what they had learned. John noticed several Federation military officers taking detailed notes. Ambassador Rodriguez approached him with Dean Zilthax. "Fascinating lecture, Professor," she said. "I think you've given our Federation friends something to think about." "Indeed," Zilthax agreed. "The Federation Council has been reviewing our integration protocols for Earth based on insights from your class. We now understand that a gentler approach will be more effective with humans." John packed up his materials. Glad the class is proving useful. But I hope I'm not just teaching the Federation how to better control humans," Rodriguez smiled. "Quite the opposite. You're teaching them why they shouldn't try to control us at all. Partnership is the only viable approach with Earth." As they walked out, Zendrax joined them. "Professor, next week you'll cover nuclear deterrence, correct?" John nodded. "Yes, how humans live for decades with the capability to destroy our entire civilization many times over." "I've ordered all senior Federation military staff to attend," Zendrax said. "The concept of building weapons you hope never to use is foreign to us. But perhaps there is wisdom in it we've overlooked." Later that evening, John sat alone in his quarters preparing for the next lecture. His communication device chimed with a message from Earth Command. "Professor Miller, your class has been monitored by Earth Intelligence. Continue as planned. Federation military interest growing as expected. Remember your secondary mission?" John deleted the message and returned to his preparation. He had been honest with his students about human warfare, but he hadn't told them everything. Some human tactics were better left untaught, at least until he was sure how the Federation would use such knowledge. The mood in the lecture hall was different today. The usual chatter before class was absent. Students and visitors sat quietly, as if they sensed the gravity of the topic. Professor John Miller looked out at the audience, which now included the entire Federation Military Council and several members of the diplomatic corps. John took a deep breath before beginning. Today we discuss what may be the darkest chapter in human military history, the development and use of nuclear weapons. He activated the projector. A holographic image appeared showing a mushroom cloud rising above a desert landscape. Many students flinched at the sight. For nearly a century, John explained, human civilization lived under the constant threat of near instantaneous annihilation. We called it mutually assured destruction, the understanding that any nuclear attack would trigger immediate retaliation, resulting in the destruction of both the aggressor and defender. A murmur ran through the audience. For beings who had known only peace for thousands of years, the concept was almost incomprehensible. The first nuclear weapons were used by the United States against Japan in 1945, ending World War II. John continued. He showed images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the bombings. The destruction was unprecedented. Entire cities destroyed in seconds, hundreds of thousands dead. Drexipal, a Federation ethicist with 4 arms and pale blue skin, raised all 4 hands simultaneously. Professor, this strategy relied on rational actors valuing survival. What prevented a leader from launching an attack during mental deterioration or political instability? Nothing but human systems and safeguards, John admitted. There were several near misses where false alarms nearly triggered launches. He displayed an image of a serious-looking man in a Soviet military uniform. In 1983, this Soviet officer, Stanislav Petrov, received warnings that American missiles were incoming. His instruments showed 5 nuclear missiles heading toward the Soviet Union. According to protocol, he should have reported this to his superiors, who would have launched a counterattack. John paused, letting the implications sink in. But Petrov didn't believe the warning was real. He decided not to report it, risking his career and possibly his life. He was right. It was a false alarm caused by sunlight reflecting off clouds. His decision likely prevented a nuclear war that would have devastated Earth. The classroom fell silent as John displayed historical footage of nuclear tests. Mushroom clouds blooming over deserts and ocean atolls. What you need to understand, he continued, is that humans lived with this existential dread for generations. It shaped our psychology, our art, our politics, everything. From the secure observation deck, Federation Military Council member Trazix watched with growing unease. Trazix had a massive, bear-like body with 6 limbs and armored skin. They're more dangerous than we realized, Trazix said quietly to Ambassador Rodriguez. Not because of their technology, which is primitive compared to ours, but because of their comfort with perpetual risk, Rodriguez nodded. Now you understand why we push so hard for our independence within the Federation Compact. We've been preparing for extinction-level threats since 1945. In the lecture hall, a student who looked like a small dragon asked, "Professor, did humans continue to build these weapons even after seeing their destructive power?" "Yes," John replied. The United States and Soviet Union built thousands of nuclear weapons, each more powerful than the ones used on Japan. At the height of the Cold War, we had enough to destroy all human life many times over. He showed a graph of nuclear proliferation. Over time. Eventually, other nations developed them too. Each new nuclear power changed the balance. We created complex theories about deterrence and first strike capabilities. A hovering sphere of light pulsed as it spoke. But surely there were attempts to eliminate these weapons? Many, John confirmed. There were treaties to limit testing and reduce numbers. But no major nuclear power was willing to give them up completely. The security they provided was too valuable. He displayed images of nuclear missile silos, submarines, and bombers. We created a triad of delivery systems to ensure that even if an enemy destroyed most of our weapons in a surprise attack, enough would survive to launch a devastating counterattack. Admiral Zendrax stepped forward. Professor Miller, the Federation has weapons of similar destructive capability. But we keep them secured in deep space, far from inhabited worlds, under multi-layered control systems. The idea of keeping such weapons on planetary surfaces, ready to launch in minutes, seems unnecessarily risky. John nodded. By Federation standards, it was. But humans didn't have your technology. We couldn't build weapons platforms in space. We had to work with what we had. He switched the display to show missile control centers with officers sitting at consoles, keys ready to turn. We created elaborate systems to prevent accidental launches. Multiple people had to agree to launch. Codes had to be verified. But the missiles had to remain ready for immediate use, or deterrence wouldn't work. From the back of the room, Supreme Commander Thex of the Federation forces spoke for the first time. Thex was a tall, slender being with metallic skin that rippled like water. Your species lived for decades knowing that your entire civilization could end in hours, Thex said. How did you function under such stress? John smiled sadly. Most people tried not to think about it. We went about our lives, working, raising families, creating art, all while this shadow hung over us. Some protested, demanding disarmament. Others built bunkers and stored supplies, hoping to survive. But mostly we just learned to live with uncertainty. He displayed a final image, the signing of a major nuclear arms reduction treaty. Over time we reduced our nuclear arsenals, the Cold War ended, the risk decreased. But nuclear weapons still exist on Earth today. The knowledge can't be unlearned. After class ended, John found himself surrounded by Federation military officials, all asking questions. How reliable were human command and control systems? How did nations verify compliance with treaties? What psychological profiles were used to select officers with launch authority? Later, in a private meeting room, John sat with Ambassador Rodriguez, Admiral Zendrax, and Supreme Commander Thex. Your lecture was most illuminating, Professor, Thex said. The Federation Council has been debating how to approach several aggressive species we've encountered beyond our borders. Some advocate for overwhelming displays of technological superiority. Others favor patience and diplomacy. And now? John asked. Now we understand there may be value in making clear the consequences of aggression, while still pursuing peaceful solutions, Zendrax said. Human nuclear deterrence, despite its risks, prevented direct conflict between your major powers. For decades. Rodriguez smiled. Exactly what we've been trying to explain since joining the Federation. Sometimes the best way to avoid using force is to be very capable of using it. As John left the meeting, he received another message from Earth Command. Phase 3 complete. Federation military doctrine already shifting. Prepare for a final phase, human warrior ethos. Remember, our goal is partnership, not domination. John deleted the message. Next week's class would be the most important yet. Not just teaching history, but shaping humanity's future in the galaxy. For the final lecture of the semester, Professor John Miller had prepared something special. The lecture hall was filled to capacity. The entire Federation Council attended, along with military leaders and diplomatic representatives from all member species. News of the human professor's class had spread throughout the galaxy. John wasn't alone today. Beside him stood 3 other humans, former Army Captain Samantha Wright, Navy SEAL Kyle Johnson, and United Nations peacekeeper Eric Ramirez. Each wore their old uniforms with pride. Today, John began, we discuss something that can't be fully conveyed through historical accounts or tactical analyses, the human warrior ethos. The room fell silent. Even the ambient sounds of various alien breathing apparatus seemed to quiet. For our final class, I've invited fellow veterans who have experienced combat firsthand. They represent different branches of Earth's military forces and different types of conflicts. John turned to Captain Wright, a tall woman with short brown hair and alert eyes that scanned the room constantly. Captain Wright served in Afghanistan and Iraq, leading troops in counterinsurgency operations. Wright stepped forward. I commanded 40 soldiers in some of the most dangerous regions on Earth. My primary mission wasn't destruction, it was protection. We built schools, secured water supplies, and trained local security forces, all while fighting those who opposed these efforts. A Federation diplomat raised a tentacle. If your mission was peaceful, why was a military force necessary? Because not everyone wanted peace, Wright answered simply. Some wanted power at any cost. They targeted civilians who worked with us. We couldn't build anything if we couldn't protect the builders. Next, Kyle Johnson spoke. The Navy SEAL was stocky and powerful with a quiet intensity. My teams conducted special operations, high-risk missions with small groups of highly trained personnel. We often worked in territories where larger forces couldn't go against targets that posed immediate threats. John added, SEALs like Kyle undergo some of the most rigorous training on Earth. Their selection process has a failure rate of over 70%. They're trained to operate in any environment, sea, air, or land. A crystalline being chimed softly. Before speaking, this specialized training, does it make humans better at killing? Johnson shook his head. It makes us better at succeeding in complex, dangerous situations. Sometimes that involves combat, but it's never the goal. The goal is completing the mission while protecting civilians and our team. Eric Ramirez stepped forward next. Unlike the others, his blue helmet and uniform represented the United Nations. I served as a peacekeeper in regions torn apart by civil war. Our job was to stand between hostile forces, protect refugee camps, and create space for diplomatic solutions. We carried weapons but used them only as a last resort. Supreme Scholar Ziltax, who had moved to sit in the front row during the semester, raised his hand. What fascinates me is how humans simultaneously celebrate and lament warfare. Your entertainment glorifies combat, yet your literature often portrays its horror. Captain Wright nodded. That contradiction is at the heart of the human experience. We recognize war as terrible, yet we honor those who fight. We create weapons of incredible destructive power, then develop elaborate rules about when and how they can be used. Kyle Johnson added, the Federation's peace has lasted millennia because your species evolved past violent conflict. Humans evolved. Through it, it shaped us for better and worse. A member of the Federation Military Council spoke next. How do humans control their aggressive instincts in peacetime? John looked at his fellow veterans before answering. We channel them into sports, into exploration, into creative pursuits. The same drive that makes a good soldier often makes a good business leader, scientist, or artist. It's about facing challenges and overcoming them. Professor Miller displayed a final series of images. The beaches of Normandy then and now, Hiroshima reconstructed, the Great Wall of China, and finally, Earth's first interstellar vessel. The same ingenuity, determination, and courage that humans brought to warfare, he concluded, now drives us to the stars. We've carried our contradictions with us, our capacity for violence alongside our desire for peace. Ramirez stepped forward. Again, I'd like to add something important. In my peacekeeping role, I worked with people from nations that had been bitter enemies just a generation before. Former adversaries worked together to help others find peace. That's also part of the human story. The room was silent for a moment before Ambassador Rodriguez stood. Thank you, Professor Miller and guests. I believe you've helped the Federation understand humanity better. We don't hide our violent past. We learn from it. As the class ended, the alien students filed out in silence, many deep in thought. Federation protocols had already been updated based on insights from the course, with new approaches to human integration that respected their unique psychology. They're not like us, Admiral Zendrax commented to Ambassador Rodriguez as they watched the students disperse. No, she agreed with a slight smile. We're not. But perhaps that's exactly why the Federation needs us. You've mastered peace in a way we still aspire to, but we understand conflict in ways you've forgotten. Together we're stronger than either would be alone. Behind them, Professor Miller packed up his materials, exchanging quiet words with his fellow veterans. The semester had gone exactly as Earth Command had hoped. Not through deception, but through honest education. The Federation now understood that humans weren't just another peaceful species to be absorbed into their collective. They were different, dangerous when threatened, but valuable as allies. That evening, a special session of the Federation Council voted unanimously to grant Earth special status within the Federation. Humans would maintain their independent military forces and have greater autonomy than other member worlds. In exchange, human military advisors would help prepare Federation forces for the growing threats at the galaxy's edge. John sat in his quarters, reading the news with satisfaction. His communication device chimed with a final message from Earth Command. Mission accomplished, Professor. Phase 5 complete. Humanity's position secured. Return to Earth for debriefing and your next assignment. The Federation Academy has requested you develop an expanded curriculum for next semester. John smiled as he began to pack. His new course was already taking shape in his mind. Human diplomatic victories, peace achieved through strength. In the Great Hall of the Federation Academy, Dean Zilthak supervised as workers installed a new plaque beside the entrance to the lecture hall. The John Miller Center for Strategic Studies below it, a quote from the professor's final lecture, Understanding. An adversary's strength is the first step toward making them an ally instead. The Federation was changing, preparing for a more complex galaxy. And humanity, the newcomers with the violent past, were helping to lead the way.